Hello everybody, welcome back as ever to Building Blocks, where we program Minecraft mods live on camera, and generally speaking, things go very haywire very quickly. Tonight, we are going to be continuing, hopefully finishing, our work on the marking UI that will make controlling large groups of mobs very easy, and we're going to be talking a little bit about how mind control works in video games, because I had a fair decent reason to think about it in this past week, and I figured, there's actually a fairly significant volume of stuff that goes into it that bears a lot of very interesting kind of discussion. So, let's start off by showing what I've done in the past week, which is to say, not a whole ton, because if I did what I was going to do today, then it'd be done by now. So, Okay, well, right into the thick of it, I guess. Here we have what is currently known in the lang file as a mystic aggregator. It is known in the code as a mystic generator and all sorts, and it is a way for you to generate larger sums of mystic energy, which is used for inscribing the audio a little bit there. Here we go. It's a way for inscribing higher level spells. After I think about level 3 by default, you need to have access to mystic energy from an ambient source. Currently, there are 2 entities that provide it. The Marimo, occasionally, sometimes, some instances of Marimo will provide mystic energy. Some ravens will also do it. But both of those provide 1 or 2 points of mystic energy, and you need a point per spell level above that minimum. So having you could for instance have an inscribing table in an attic space surrounded by mystic ravens, or in a nice sort of aquatic environment surrounded by mystic marimo or something in between. But getting that many is difficult because you can't breed them. These, on the other hand, you can in fact craft. They're a little bit involved in that regard, because the first thing that you need, it's either I'm in creative mode for this, the first thing that you happen to need is mithril ore. And this is very rare. Currently, this is probably going to get reduced, currently it is 1 in 1,000 chunks has a mithril ore. They only spawn in 1 block veins. And if you manage to grab it then, and you'll get yourself some mithril ingots by smelting, you can then craft together the inert version, which is the mystic aggregator. The mystic aggregator by itself, in that condition, does nothing. It is purely decorative at that stage. In order to actually make it useful, you have to actually enchant it. And the enchantment for that is Mystic Power. That is the only enchantment that the Mystic Aggregator will accept. It's the only one you can put on. You cannot get Mystic Power onto a book, that sort of thing. And the higher that enchantment, and it goes up to 3, the more power a particular aggregator will be able to store at a given time. It retains the enchantment if you put it down and break it up, so that's fine. The amount of power it currently contains is demonstrated by how many magic circles are around it. So if I plonk this one down and then wait a day, an in-game day, it will regain a point of power. Actually, no. If I wait 3 minutes, I think I set it to 3 minutes. So if I stand here and yammer for long enough, we should see another one come along. And in fact, I'll plonk down a few of them just so it becomes a little more obvious when that happens. As you can see, they are rotatable. Okay. So yes, the colors of the circles don't have any bearing on what spells you can inscribe. You don't need to have green ones to make transmutation spells, that sort of thing. It's just an indicator of magic power. Don't worry about it. But these are the first tile entity that can actually provide mystic energy to inscribing tables, which is pretty nice. And they're also the first thing you can make out of mithril. Mithril with a Y, because I know how badly the Tolkien estate will defend its copyrights, even if mithril with an I is pretty commonplace at this point in fiction and the like. So, yeah, mithril. Also, I like it with a Y. It feels a bit more like mythical, I guess, if it's mithril somehow. It's a weird thing, I know, but still, it's better that way. And what this now means is that if you mine for long enough, you can theoretically make a station surrounded by these things, just ticking off, like with like a chunk loader, for instance, just accumulating vast quantities of mystic energy, and then you can just make a whole ton of high-level spells. Now, another feature that is presently unique to the Mystic Aggregator is that when you use the power out of a Mystic Raven or a Mystic Marimo, all of that power is gone. Doesn't matter how much it has, doesn't matter how much or little you use, all of it goes down, it goes. So, I think it's Ravens will store up to 2 power at a time, and it will then take a day for them to get that 2 power back. It doesn't have a stage in between where it has 1, so it's all or naught, but it's 0 levels or 2. And the Marimo has a similar thing, it will only have 1 or naught, and it regains that after a day. These regain 1 point of power every 3 minutes, up to the cap defined by their Mystic Power enchantment. So, if you only need, say, a 4th level spell every 3 minutes or so, then you can just get the most basic level here, and it will be useful every 4 minutes, no problem. Is it time to tease about Yog Dwarves not being worked on? Yog Dwarves hasn't been touched since... I think before I had a bigger office. Like, that project has been dead for years at this point. And I have no intention of going back to it. Oh, and we have our first circle. Hooray, which means the other ones should start popping on in a quick moment here. But yes, so these are very good if you're trying to make fairly low level, but still sufficiently high level to require Mystic Energy spells in like a rapid period of time. That said, there is still a significant period of waiting time, so you're probably not going to be pumping out spells at an extremely rapid pace. There is no like inscribing table gober kind of situation here. So that is kind of that's kind of a significant point. It's meant to be a meaningful limitation on access to spells. But of course, if you have spells in a spell list, which is part of your player data, those spells come back every time you sleep, no matter what, anyways. So that's that basically distinguishes the two. So this is artificial access to spells versus the innate access to spells, but that's controlled more by things like pacts as well as commands. So, yay! Alright, on to the things what we were working on. So, last time, oh yes, I should mention that the textures on the Mystic Aggregator, and even the name, I'm 100% sold on it, are temporary. It's the right model, just not the right look for it just yet. Okay. So last time we were working on how we control our different companion mobs, because we have mobs in this game, or at least in this mod, that you can give direct commands to. So if I hold down X, we will see that there is absolutely nothing around, because there are no companions nearby for me to do anything with, so I have no possible commands to give them. If I summon ourselves as a Jared, as we've sort of begun to call them. So, Jared, get under the there. You'll probably be fine. Don't need to worry. Okay. I need to give you an unbreakable helmet, because otherwise you're going to be around for a very short demonstration. Did I write that right? Yes, I did. Good. Okay, Jared, wear that. Thank you. His UI still needs a little bit of work here, but it's fine. Okay. Now that I have a Jared, I can issue one of a variety of different commands. So activate, I can tell you guard. Most importantly for right now, I'll just tell you to go there. Okay. And if I tell him to guard, he'll set his home position, but right now he'll just let go of that. And what commands I can give is dependent upon the companions in my near vicinity, and that sort of thing. And as we can see, there are different icons, so I don't necessarily need to read what the text says. I just need to know what the different icons mean, which you'll probably get after a certain point of playing anyways. And the command that you are most likely to most immediately need is always at the start of it. So if I just want to say go over there, I barely even have to hold X at all. Just click it. Is this going to link into the mind control and games topic? Yes. Jared is a skeleton. He literally has no brain. So theoretically, it's immaterial what the difference is. But yeah, so I can also tell you to do a variety of things to this horse, which is actually a member of the mount spell. So I can tell you to follow, guard, move. One of my favorite ones, mount. This is incredibly hacky, but it works quite well. It's lovely. I like it. And if I'm not aiming at anything, I can tell them to follow me and stuff as well. So, yay. Very good, very good. A good and loyal skeleton. But if we are a budding necromancer, we can have 30 plus different Jareds around. So to fix that, to actually control that, we need to be able to select them. For that, we have the C key by default, and that adds Jared to our list of creatures that we'll be sending commands to with our next issue. Now, as you can see, firstly, Jared doesn't have a Langfowl name right now, but more significantly, that's taking up space on my screen. Now imagine that multiplied by 30, multiplied by even just 10, and a significant chunk of our screen has now been overtaken with names or icons of some description or such and the like. So, tonight, our first port of call is to try and create a system that will render that same information, but in an extremely concise fashion, so that we don't have to worry about not being able to see what we're trying to give an orders to, essentially. For those of you who were last in these streams when I was doing Yogg Dwarves, imagine the order system. It's a lot smoother and easier to use now. It's not that complex, it doesn't get passed around, that sort of thing. There's a very instantive things, but nonetheless. So, okay. Here's the options section that we were previously working on, and here's the part where we start to actually get ourselves the actual display. So, how do we define, let's start off, how do we even define what we show? Because if you are a budding necromancer, you probably have, let's say 12, for the sake of argument right now, you probably have 12 identical creatures. So it's not really very useful if you just have zombie written 12 times on your screen. You already know that you in fact have, like, you already know that they're zombies and they have no distinction to them, so it's not really very useful to know that. But one of the commands that you can give a zombie is to pick up or equip an item. So now you'll want to know which specific zombies have you selected that have that equipment. That's now significant information. If you rename a given zombie, do you need to see the unique name? So essentially we need to create a list, and in that list we need to have distinct mobs. If you have 15 different skeletons all armed with power 2 bows, and 5 skeletons armed with stone swords, and 2 skeletons that are decked to the heels in diamond armor and named Dave, all of that is information that you need to be able to see. And ideally, we need to try and keep it as short and concise as possible, because, again, you need... The key factor here is usability. If it's covering your screen, you can't really do much. So, currently, all that we generate is a list of names. What we need to do next is create essentially a map. Not like a map of terrain or such, but a hash map. A map of, here is a value of any determinants type that we like, and here is the, like, name or the NBT data or whatever we need to show, or, like, here is our prototype, our holotype, it would be described as in archaeology, of what we display. And every time that we go through the list of marked entities, we need to identify if it is equal in fact to any of those pre-existing holotypes, and increase their number by 1 if so. Would it be useful to code that if you equip X color leather helmet, that mob group appears highlighted in that color in the UI? It conceivably could, except that generally there's a lot of spells that will just create a whole ton of mobs at once, so if you want to be able to control them like that, it's a little complicated. There's a lot of ways that I could refine this and make this significantly more convoluted, such as like having a hotkey for selecting certain known companion mobs that you have. So zombie team A versus skeleton team B, that sort of thing. You just hit a button, select those. That's getting way beyond my my remit for this particular version, so we're just gonna keep away from that. Okay, so we want MB tag compound and integer. So we want display data new hash map. There we go. If I can type it correctly, thank you. Okay. Now the reason that we're doing MBT, the MB tag compound there, is that Minecraft stores all entities, all items, everything in a proprietary data storage function known as MB tag, or MBT to be exact. And that means that we can go through all of those entities, store them in an MBT, and then compare. And if, at that point, our display data map contains, similar enough, there will be variants, details about a mob inside of itself, then we should be able to identify that those are sufficiently similar as to be grouped. Okay. So, for every entity in our marked entities list. Marked entities, by the way, is drawn from a list of UUIDs, which are unique to every single entity, and we only list the ones that are actually detected, as in the ones that are loaded currently. So if you select the homunculus in your alchemy base, and then you go through the Nether 10,000 kilometers away back to a spawn or something, you're not going to be able to send a command to them. There's some other limitations that we should probably have, but for right now, that's that. Okay. So write to a new MB tag compound. And now we need to find out if marked entities contains something that is akin to it. What is Dob? Dob is a parody of Dab, suffice it to say, because I am old and I am not hip with the kids. Okay, so from ent data we need to subtract values that we don't care about, such as how far you've fallen, or how, like, what your position is. That's the most obvious thing that we need to not care about. This is better? Oh yes, much better. Quite frequently we have Carol the Fox over tonight, but tonight we have Stupid Fox. Okay, so let's look at all the things in here that are stored that we do not need to care about. Oh, Skies, thank you very much. 8-month streak. Well, there is in fact quite a lot of stuff in here that we don't really need to care about. So let's see. What things here do we care about? Custom name we definitely need to care about. And that is actually about the only thing in here that we need to care about. So write entity to MBT, its custom name, as well as its entity ID, which I presume is listed here somewhere, but I don't see it so far. Let's see, where's that get called? Copy data from old? Nope. Ah, serialized. There you are. There's the ID. Okay. So if we ask you to serialize MBT, then we get the MBT data that is used when you're actually stored. Gotcha. But get entity string would suffice for the most part. Let's create ourselves a function, because I suspect we're going to need one. What are my pronouns? He, him. But I understand why you ask. I've probably gotten quite a bit more confusing since a few of you were in chat. Your suddenly decided you hadn't verified your email even though you did that months ago. That might be a recent change to how the chat is done here. Which was done so that we didn't have quite as many unpleasant folks inside of it. Okay. If display data dot contains key int data, then display data. Well, actually, no, we could do this even easier. Int tally equals 0. Tally equals display data dot get int data plus 1. And then we just put it back. Okay. That will get us a list of entities with matching MPT data. Once we... Right now, however, every single one will match because we just return a new MPT data. So... Last time I was here, you still had a blue hat with little ears. Oh. You might have missed the like 2 sets of accent wear heads I had then. Like, these are Kraken Kitty editions. Alright, so data
well,
set
well.
string
Crime flies when you're having
ID.
fun.
Yeah? Well, from crime flies while you're having fun. 42 months, nice. Made in time for the stream. Yay, good to see you. Welcome everybody. So that would be entity string. Nope. Okay, hang on. What's the value you used then? Way down here. Get entity string. Is that not a public value? Really? Huh. That's not a public method. That's interesting. Of all of the things, why is that protected? Okay, well, that's fine. We can replicate most of what it does here anyways. Thankfully, it seems... Yep, indeed. The entity list itself has its own thing for that. Hopefully that's the same sentence. Did you turn on some kind of text-to-speech accidentally, or do some things just get read out? I believe the subs and such get called out, and sufficiently large donations. Okay, next thing. When our entity stores itself via getEntityString, it calls write to MBT, which is distinct from write entity to MBT. Now, virtually nothing in this entire section is relevant to us, because we mostly just want what comes out of write entity to MBT. So, we can just ask to set, we can just set the custom name. We don't even need to know if it's visible at that stage. Essentially, right now, we're just assembling a list of all relevant information that should cause a distinction between mobs. Okay. Are you kidding me? Oh, don't tell me. I'm about to check something and I think I know what it already is. Yep. Okay. Both reading and writing are protected values, which means we can't access them from a non-entity class. Ooh, that's mean. Why? Why is that the case? I mean, busy for most of the year, especially the last few months. Oh, one thing after another. Okay. Let's think. What's the alternative here? Since we can't do this, since we can't access the values by, since we can't access the different functions individually because they're protected, we can only access the first on the list, the top of the pyramid, if you will. At that stage, we're probably just going to have to extract basically everything we don't care about. Alternatively, we can just create ourselves a set of accessible values that we do care about, such as custom name, entity type, and what their current equipment is. That should be accessible values. So, let's go to Entity Living Base and see how it handles the storing of held items and such. Let's see, that's the on-update part. We want the right part. Right entity to NPT. So there's health. I would use health, but in a combat situation, that's liable to get very messy very quickly. So, probably not a great idea. Entity equipment. There you are. And it... Nope, that's just removing it to get the base attribute values. Active effects... Not dreadfully interested there. Okay, interesting that armor doesn't appear to be included here. Okay, let's go to entity living. Good morning, everybody. How you doing, Booked? Okay, armor. There we go. Armor and hand items. Those should be fairly relevant to us. We probably don't need to know too much about the like drop chances or persistence or such. But okay, if entity is an instance of entity living base, because if we tried to do that on, say, your mage hand, it would break. Should I change this to compound just for the time being as well? Because pretty much everything calls it compound. Oh, hey, hey, mate. Good to see you. How's the coast this time of year? Okay, we don't need to be able to retrieve this data, we just need to be able to compare it. Which is a very crucial thing, which is to say we're not looking for long storage here. Okay, so we can't access that value. Because that's a private value. Okay, fine. Get item stack from slot will suffice. I'll move the village over. Pretty nippy. Oh dear. Let's see. Do we just want all of them? We'll get basically all the things we're interested in, so... Sure, I guess. In which case... item stack equals living.get item stack from slot there. And that should mean... there should be a value inside of equipment slot that we can use to distinguish... Yeah, by type. There we go. So, if we take that to there, and that to there, shuffle this up to there, rename these so that we know what they are. So that would be MBT armor. And this would be MBT list hems. Okay. So in that case, if slot dot type equals type dot armor, go there. Otherwise, stick it in the hands. Perfect. And then we actually only need the one loop. Which is always good. There's a lot of loops I'm trying to nail down right now. Okay. And then we just tag those onto the bottom of our compound. Okay. Do we need to wonder if any of those are empty? Again, we're not trying to rebuild it. We're not going to reconstitute any kind of creature from this. So that shouldn't be a problem. For the most part, I imagine just the custom name and the ID should be sufficient. That also means that we can quite easily identify specific named entities when we're trying to rebuild it, otherwise we'll just generate a fresh one from that. There is a non-zero possibility. There is a non-zero possibility that we might want to be able to show specific details, like which ones have armor on, for instance. Because otherwise, if we don't reconstitute the entity, then we just have a zombie in full diamond armor being identical in the list to a zombie with no armor at all. Oh, you have business cards made? Cool. Okay. Let's stick with that for the time being. So that stores all of this in a rigorous fashion that we can then actually go through. So from there, we need to actually identify our... we need to actually go through our names. Essentially. Do I even use names to display? I do not. Wow. Alright. So, for every key value inside of our display data, which would be ambitag compound, we now need to firstly identify exactly how many we're actually looking at here. So that would be display data dot get that data, which is probably going to be 1, at least for the time being, but if it is 1, then hey, that's progress. That should actually initialize as 1, otherwise it will be 0. Oh. Okay, and now we need to know what we're going to call it. So, if what do we go for here? trying to figure what the formatting should be. Let's go for a text component translation. Call it entry equals new text component translation. I have misspelled that, but don't worry about it. GUI. Those are just mod info, that's what I'm looking for. Prefix. Marking. List. Set. Call it list entry, I guess, for right now. And the values for that we're going to want are the mob name, which we don't have currently. And should it be 15x zombie or zombie 15, like x 15? For right now, we'll presume it's zombie x 15. This is a problem for future lying. 5 minutes later. Curse you, past lying. Yeah. Okay, string. Mob name equals. We'll just hard code it for a hot minute as Jared. Okay. Names to display, then just adds. Let's see. Entry. Formatted text. Oh, I can type properly. There we go. Okay. And over in our lang file, which is not the thing I clicked on because apparently I'm just in that kind of a mood tonight. Let's see, I should have a bunch of marking thing related here. There you are. So that should be blank x blank. We'll have some handling later on to make it so that it doesn't actually display a number if there's only one. But for right now, that'll do. Okay. So if data.hasKey custom name mob name equals data get string custom name. Otherwise, Jared. Hey, Moritz. Okay. Now here's the next slight hiccup in my scheme, because I forgot about this. There's currently, with the way that this system is presently set up, indexing. So it will change the color of a given object if the creature in that particular entry can receive whatever you are currently attempting to mark. Which is to say, if you have a mage hand inside of your current selection and you're attempting to give an attack order, the mage hand doesn't like pop up and say, "Hey, yeah, I can do that," despite the fact I'm ethereal and have a like maximum force of like less than 5 pounds. So for right now, we'll just ignore that slight problem. I'm sure it won't come back to bite me in the future. So we're just gonna say, for all of the names to display, Mage Hand Punch. I mean, that may well be a thing that will have some form of later. There is a spell called Bigby's Hand of Force or whatever it is, and it's notorious for just being a giant glowing hand you can punch people with. Okay, just hardcode the highlight to be true right now. There, less headache. The Bigby's hand spells are going to be very interesting because they're basically variants on the same summonable configurable mob, or summonable companion essentially. £5 is still £5, even getting backed with it will cause someone to pause. You're not wrong. Well, at that point, it's 5 pounds of mass. What's the velocity? Because a small enough, like, a small enough volume of mass traveling at a high enough velocity will kill someone. That's how bullets work. Okay, let's see how swiftly I've broken things. So what we should see on the left-hand side of our screen when I select our Jared is entity, skeleton, companion, whatnot. Or that. Which is because I didn't refresh the lang file. Okay, let me quickly do that. Assuming that I... Did I call it marking list entry? Mark list entry. Ah, okay, right, yes. Also gave it the wrong name. That's why. Mark, not marking. Dude we rescue from Mars remarkably often. That. Remarkably heavy, remarkably rock and roll bit of synthwave here, but I think the theoretical max speed of a mage hand, at least in Dungeons and Dragons that I recall, is 30 feet per 6 seconds. So more like 5 foot per second. Somebody wants to work out the like how much force that could theoretically be converted to on impact, please go ahead. I've been quite curious. This is D&D's mod. Yes, it's not everything here is actually derived entirely from like D&D. The aggregators certainly aren't, but D&D 3.5 especially is our metric. Okay, good starts. We have identified that we have pointed at Anne and Jared. Let's summon ourselves some additional Jareds for, like, reasons. Why not? There. Okay. That's a bad idea, and you're about to find out why. There you go. What did I tell you? Okay. Shift C to clear. Do. Good. All of you, I want you to guard that position. Thank you very much, so none of you die. But okay, that does show that we are seeing a bunch of Jareds on our screen there. However, there we go. Okay, that's good. That shows that it has distinguished this particular Jared from those Jareds over there. Grand. Now, you might notice the first problem, which is, firstly, we're not actually drawing the mob's name from that. Secondly, we have no visual explanation as to why we are singling out that Jared from those Jareds. So we need to try and figure that part out. We need to try and give some kind of display as to why is that particular Jared distinct. And this, I believe, is where we change from storing MBT to actually having a holotype. I think I've explained this one before already, but a holotype in biology and archaeology especially is the exemplary specimen of a species. Which is to say, this is the thing that we hold as being like the metric of what is that. That sort of thing. Now, to fix that, I think we're going to need to expand our map a little bit. So right now, we have the MB tag that says these are all functionally the same thing. And we have the integer that says here's how many of them we've managed to find. We can change this to be a tuple, which is a pair of things. And in our case, we're going to say it's an integer and an entity. So we want that, and we want to get the first value. A tuple is just a pair of values. A base model you make a cast of to produce a more identical. Yes, exactly. It's the mold, as it were. Okay. And we also going to need our entity for our entity. Might as well call it the hollow. Equals ent. What are we gonna call that? Data, I guess, for right now. Tally, and then holotype. Okay. Now it has a slightly more complex thing because now we have to actually store this stuff. Or rather, we're storing the stuff that we care about for distinguishing, but then we're also storing the entire entity, which makes a few things easier. Could you go over the pound force and max velocity of the hand? Oh, right, okay. The maximum velocity, I believe, of the mage hand is 5 feet per second. And its maximum force is about 5 pounds. I don't remember precisely, so I'll have a quick look. Okay, as a move action, you can propel the object as far as 15 feet in a direction, which would suggest that 15 feet per round, or 6 seconds, is its actual max speed, which would be something like 2.5 feet per second. And it can only lift an unattended object weighing up to 5 pounds. So it's 5 pounds of force traveling at 2.5 feet per second. There you go. Let's change that to be entry. It no longer matters what the mob name is, because we can derive that quite happily. So that would be data, and that would be display data get entry. And then our tally is just the first value stored inside of that, and our mob name would be our second value's get name. Okay. Oh, and you're complaining because you're actually, yeah. Entry text. Okay. I'll be back in about 10 minutes to actually make this work. Hey everybody, welcome back. And just before we left off there, we were working on getting some more information into our arrangements here so that we can actually make this work. And first up, a little bit of housekeeping here, which is that we've got 3 different loops going. We've got one that goes through all of our available entities. We also have one that actually creates that list, because that's a loop as well. And that generates our map, and then we loop through our map's key sets to create the names to display, and then we loop through the names to display to do all of this. We don't need to be doing all of that. We can, in fact, shorten this up a decent chunk. Give or take. There is some limitations that I will describe in a hot second as I do this. So that we know, that would be entry text formatted. And our highlight value is basically this, drawn from our holotype. Now, that depends on our creature being an eye-configurable mob, but we can presume it is, or else it wouldn't be if only configurable mobs can actually receive these commands, so if our holotype somehow isn't one, something's gone weird anyways. Okay. So that saves us a loop, which is always good. Now, there's a caveat here, which is that because we're doing this without generating the names and then doing any further quality assurance to them, our numbers are going to be all over the place. It'll basically just be in the sequence in which they're added to the list. So, if, for instance, we have a group of 4, and a group of 2, and a group of 1, and a group of 6, and all that stuff, they won't be organized at all. So you'll have solitary individuals, like butting shoulders with big groups and all sorts.
Pride 100, Pride 100.
For ease of efficiency here, we're just going to leave this as is without doing that, so yay. Thank you very much for those 300 biddies there, Aspa. Thank you very much. I do appreciate me some biddies. And, okay. So, now that we have our holotype, which is our entity that is treated as being the exemplary case of its group, we can now actually render it, if should we desire. Ideally, you would only render, say, the head of a given mob. That would be the smallest thing that we could put on screen. In this case, that's probably not going to be reliably possible, for the simple reason that configurable mobs can be all kinds of things that aren't necessarily going to be bipedal mobs. A lot of them certainly will be, but mounts are also configurable mobs, so I can't just render a horse's head. Unfortunately, there is no Godfather code here for that. So that's just something that we have to deal with. But we should at least be able to actually see that there's, like, highlighting going on now. It won't be any different because all of our Jareds are the same, but it should at least work to that effect. So just see how that goes, and then we'll move on to getting actual, like, display. There's always something. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You also need to remember, I'm programming this predominantly in 1080p. I know full well a lot of people do not play Minecraft at 1080p. A lot of people don't even play it at 720p. So, I do need to bear in mind how large I make things. But okay, so there is our central group of Jareds. Yep. And here is our solitary group of Jared. And we do in fact see that they are distinguished, and we also see that they are order of entrance, pretty much. Yep, can add you. Yep, all good. If I was to remove all of these, which one am I looking at? There we go. Then, yeah, there's end up like that. Bloop, like that. Good. Solitary Jared over here. Could you move this way, please? Just so I can aim at you easier. Thank you. So I should rename you, probably. Okay. So if I do that, they indent, and they turn white. They're good. And until I get to a command that they can't execute, which is, namely, none. Okay. Be able to smack someone with 1.7 newtons of force, which is the same as about 0.38 pounds of force, or 0.17 kilograms of force for the metrically enabled. Not very much. Could be error code. Error. Have heard a uni student cry that they got that. Oof. Yeah, there are so many errors to be had with Minecraft. But okay. Let's rename one of you. So let's see. Entity data at e tech equals varod. Skeleton companion. I think it's C equals 1. Custom name. Janet. Why not? Okay. So we have Janet, and you should display differently from the other ones because you are not custom named, and you should display differently from the other ones because you're armored. Okay. Janet amongst the Jareds. Very good. So, let's figure out some rendering. Oh joy. Now we already do a little bit of rendering that will be very similar to this. Which is related to when you're holding one of the odd eggs, which are the spawn eggs used for oddities, the creatures from this mod. So, if I go over to there, if I can find the code for that, I can largely just replicate it. What is it? Mob preview? Preview mob? I know it's around here somewhere, that's for sure. Item. Entity preview. There you are. Wish you were done with maths? Oh. Believe me, you're never done with maths. Okay. So, very simple function here. We just need the resolution, we just need the position on the screen, and we can rotate it however much or little we like, as well as give it the entity, and then we should be fine. So if we have the holotype, that should mean that we can actually display our entities quite happily. This is going to be a mess, starting out. Gonna tell you that right now. There is no way on Earth that this is not going to be a mess, initially. But welcome to a programming stream. Okay, so we need to find... I believe we can get scaled resolution just by giving... Yeah, we can just create our own resolution if we need to. I think, yeah, just give it a client, it'll be fine. This is client side anyways, it shouldn't be a problem. Okay. Call that y times 10. We'll say 0f for our rotation. And this would be data.getSecond. That's our holotype. What is your concern? Free 2 ints. Ah, I guess I need to float there. Nope. 2 ints, 2 free floats. Let's have a look here. Width, height, position X, position Y, in float form, and the integer spin ticks. Okay, there we go. There. Problem solved. I do wonder if pos X then is going to be... Yeah, that, to me, suggests that it is proportional, not linear. Which is an extremely fancy way of saying, I think that's a percentage of across the screen rather than being like a pixel point. In which case, if y times 10 is relative to our width, then over the scaled height. Let's see, see, is that a float? No, that'll be an integer, won't it? There. Okay, now it should be 10%. Let's see how this goes. Now we can... I think pos y is gonna be... This is gonna be going that way as opposed to that way, which is problematic, but for its own reasons. The next problem, of course, is making them small enough that they don't just crowd the screen. We ideally want them to be not too much taller than their own, like, name display. Okay. Show me Janet's. And also Jared's and other Jared's and significantly more distinct Jared. The reason this is significant is we should be able to see what they're currently equipped with. Okay, there's Janet. And you. Yes. Okay, there's a little bit of concern there. In that it's animating when they're moving around. Is that necessarily a bad thing? I wonder. I don't think so. But we probably do want to delink them. Which is fine. We can do that. Yep, it's a skeleton party, everybody. Okay, everybody guard here, please. That includes you, Jared. Over here. Jared? Over here. Thank you. There's a range limit by which point he'll not actually care. There. Jared, you're kind of disappointing me here, I gotta say. But you're the one that can't burn, at least, so fine. Wolfram kindly notes. Okay. In order to ensure that we have in order to ensure that we have like a clean model that doesn't wander around and all that sorts of stuff, we're going to need to firstly push our matrices and pop our matrices just to ensure that those don't get crossed. Probably worth drawing afterwards as well. Okay. We're gonna need to create a new entity. Which I guess we'll just call clone for the time being, equals entity list dot create entity by ID from name should be fine, or we can create it from a UUI. We can create it from MBT actually, in which case we can just have our entity create it from its own MBT. Serialize should suffice. And we should have access to a world, yes we do. Okay. In that case, draw the clone. Clone rotation yaw, we can then also set there. Okay. Now, if we alter the scale using the state manager, we should be able to make them smaller as well. Let's say from where they were currently, we want them to be about 10% that height. And let's also store that as a value so that I don't have to alter each one individually the next time I need to change that value, because I definitely will. Okay. And let's see. We want to be changing our X according to that, not... Well, our y according to that, and not our x. Just by doing that. That should be correct. Am I correct? No, I'm not. Okay. There we go. 0.9 should be way across, though, so let's make that way lower. Like 9%, for instance. Okay. That should work. The thing I'm going to quickly do, though, is set a new UID. So mc.world.rand.next. Never mind. Just gonna leave that alone for the time being. I'm probably overthinking it anyways. So they should be going vertically. They should be should be on the far left, and they should hopefully be much smaller. This is not going to be this not perfect system. Another thing we can do, for instance, is just not include the name at all unless the mob has a custom name. That way you don't need to see zombie times 15, there's just a picture of a zombie times 15. We could also theoretically render them slightly like a stack, so if there are 15 zombies, we can show, like, at least 3 zombies slightly off position from each other. But let's see how this goes. So, you crash the game. Great. It's a start. What happens? We tried to set the clone's position, or the clone's rotation. And there was evidently a null. Null will be returned and a warning will be logged. Okay. Next question. Why? Do we see any kind of, like, information here? Null pointer at read entity from MBT. On my own skeleton. Huh. Let's see. Create entity from MBT. Thrown at read from MBT. Because of something else. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, can we figure that out better then? Well, night, Roy. Have a good sleep. Trying to think. From the display data, we should just be able to get... We should actually just be able to make a brand new creature, and then just have it read from the MBT data that we have. In which case, get the key for get second dot get class. That would just create a fresh, brand new, nothing to worry about, skeleton companion. Okay. Now the part that we actually need, which is the part that shows what it looks like. Clone, read from, NBT, and this would be, let's actually get our holotype up here, because we seem to be using it a lot. Holo.serialize. Let's see if that similarly crashes. It shouldn't. He said unclear, but nonetheless. The fact that happened inside of my specific form of skeleton might just be wholly a coincidence. Might. Because of course, when I'm doing these live streams, absolutely nothing of any trouble whatsoever ever happens. Right. Anytime you'd like to load, that'd be nice. There we go. Okay. Sans where there is no war in parsing say, there are no bugs in my code. If you encounter a bug, it's because of what you're doing with my code, but there are no bugs on my code. Still a problem. Interesting. Same route, I'm guessing. Read from NBT on the Skeleton Companion, apparently. Evidently, is the inventory not... Oh, the inventory is not initialized. Okay. That's odd. Oh, I know exactly what to do, come to think of it. That. Literally, just that. That should be all that's necessary. It's fine. Okay, well we are about halfway through the stream, so I believe now is time to break out the secondary discussion topic. That is mind control in, well, just any game, really. So, mind control, in a nutshell, is the capacity to take control of another entity's like behavior, actions, whatever you want to call it, really. And in a lot of cases, that can be extremely vague. You are most commonly mind controlling basically anything in an RTS, for instance. That work? That works. Okay. And I think I can I think I can just about make out one of our skeletons in the top left there, that little blip. Yeah. That's a stack of skeletons. Oh, yeah, that's... That's... we've... itty-bitty skeletons, everybody. Oh, wow. Okay. Right, well, fortunately, that's easy to fix. Yeah. Yeah, in an RTS, you are pretty much always controlling your units. You're able to tell them, go here, go there, shoot that guy, run from that guy, what the hell are you doing, get in that zone. In most RPGs, you can you have mind control in effect over your companions, because at the very least they're following you until you tell them otherwise. And generally speaking, this is fairly easy to accomplish. You just have a what is called a controller, which the easiest way I can describe is the creature that you see in-game is a body, and the controller is the brain, and if you need them to change their behavior substantially enough, you just swap out the brain for something else. In a lot of games, especially nowadays, your personal player body in the world is itself such a body, and you are the controller. Meaning that you could theoretically change your player character to be whatever you like in the game, depending on what conditions it gives you, and control that as normal. Similarly, you could take control, mind control, another creature just by swapping out its AI brain for your brain. That, however, is not the full end of it. Okay, I think the point to the left was fine. I think we just maybe need to think of how we change this. And I think that's fine, actually, as is. We'll change that to that. Let's also change that to 50 pixels per int of y. That's probably way too many, but you know, we'll put it to 25. I think font renderer height is about 15. I'm not sure. Nine, apparently. So yeah, let's keep that at 25 for the time being. Okay. Turn my skeletons into skelekilos at best, more or less. So yes, that is the basics of mind control in video games, is you just swap out the controller for something that the player can, in some fashion, influence. Intriguingly, as I came to realize fairly recently, mind control isn't just the things we call mind control. If mind control is overriding the inherent AI behavior, or just the inherent behavior of any given creature in order to control it to do something else, then mind control actually also includes charm effects, the things that make things think you're just an ally or some such. And it also includes possession, which is a bit more obvious, as that's the aforementioned swapping out a creature's AI controller entirely for instance, yours. But there's more to this, because all of what I've just said functions upon the presumption that mind control is only ever used by the player against mobs, other creatures. Jarrets, for instance. And okay, well that's... We're definitely getting better there. They're larger now. They're growing in power and intensity. But we do need to change where they're rendering. I wonder if the code's gonna allow me to modify it. You're about to ask by places when the cases when the player can be controlled. Yes, that is the problem. You see, in order for here we go. In order for the player to be controlled, you have to override the player's control. You have to basically make... You more or less, you have to give the player an out-of-body experience, or potentially a case of locked-in syndrome. Players hate this, to be very clear, because it means that all of their agency is gone. And that then means that the player, previously able to so much as wander around, or even just access their own inventory, or like turn their camera, no longer has that option. Okay, yeah, that's not gonna update live for me. Only does so occasionally anyways. Players really hate that. It's one of the standard, like, holy commandments of game design that you don't do that. Also, evidently 25 was insufficient, but we're getting there. In fact, what we can maybe say is resolution scaled height over 10, for instance. If we have 10 entries, then that's either 10 very distinct mobs or upwards of a few hundred. Who knows? I don't actually have a hard limit on how many you can select at once. But yeah, you don't, as a holy rule of game design is that you never take away agency from the player. You never take away the things that you've given them. You never take away their capacity to have like some impact upon the game state. Because then why is the player there at all? And why did you give it to them in the first place? So, to that effect, mind control is extremely difficult to actually apply to a player. Because if you just do it verbatim as you do to other mobs, then the player's not having fun anymore. If they have, like, actually some form of resistance to it, here's the next slight problem. If a player is able to break out of mind control, for instance, maybe there's some kind of neurological struggle mechanic, or some capacity for them to resist the directions of whomever is controlling them, then it is strictly less effective against players specifically. So if you then level the playing field by saying, okay, mobs that are affected by mind control have some kind of simulated neurological struggle that occasionally also must result in them breaking out, suddenly mind control is dramatically less effective in general. Why would you ever use it if it's so unreliable? Like, generally speaking, if you're going to kill someone, you can either use the low-level thing that's guaranteed to work, or the high-level thing that has a chance to work. Generally speaking, players will tend to favor the guarantee over the unreliable. Okay, we still have a skeleton up there, and intriguingly, they're still very clearly just in that tiny little spit up there. Very interesting. In theory, we should have seen them be actually like about a tenth of the way down. Interesting. Is making certain mobs unkillable or untargetable a form of mind control? Not on those mobs, but preventing mobs from targeting something is frequently a consequence of mind control. Now, I've been thinking about mind control a lot recently because I want to implement it as part of various oddities. It's an effect that goes quite far and has some dramatic implications if you do it right. So, I had a thought. I had a very long think. I talked to a bunch of other devs about it. We do at least now see that our clones aren't moving around as our other skeletons appear to be, so that's a start. Let's increase to about 50% scale as a start here. And then let's figure out our YPOS. So we'll say it is 0.1f plus y times 0.1f, which should hopefully work out to being slightly downstairs and then slightly further downstairs. Hopefully. I don't think it will, but we'll see. Let's actually dial this up to 1 and just see what happens. It'll also let us inspect our skeletons more. But yeah, so I want to get it working. Now, the big hurdle in getting mind control working for various oddities is that Minecraft has no concept at all of a mob controller kind of system. At all. Nothing. This is to the point that mobs and players aren't really the same species. They're not actually even the same animal kingdom. They do have a common root. That is the class entity living base, which you can actually see loaded up here. But players branch off immediately from that, whereas every other mob in the entire game branches off from that via the entity living class. After that, you have pigs, cows, villagers, sheep, zombies, skeletons, the wither, everything comes out of entity living, which is itself a branch of entity living base. So that means you can never treat them the same. You can't cast them. Unless you're casting them as entity living base, in which case they are then finally similar. Now, this is where things get troublesome, because players have hard-coded input in Minecraft, which is to say, if a player pushes W on their keyboard, they will pretty much the game will try its darndest to make them go forwards. It's almost impossible to prevent them, in fact, from doing that. Whereas Entity Living implements what are called AI tasks. That's where the AI system comes in. So, if I could find it, yeah. Entity Living is where AI comes in, which is to say players have no AI. You can't replace anything that's not there. So this means it is impossible to change what your player is, and it is impossible to give a player direct control of a mob without some extreme chicanery. And it can't go the other way. So I've been struggling, trying to think of how the hell I should do that, because I want to do it. It'd be so cool. Like, even if it gets used against you, it'd be so cool, especially if you're playing with a friend, for instance. And the first thing that occurred to me is that we already have mind control for mobs, at the very least, or some mobs, a handful, a selection of mobs. Because we have this system that lets us tell different mobs to do stuff. It is very interesting. It doesn't want to move, it doesn't want to shift them down very far. But we are getting ourselves a stack in there. And we will see that it is only the free bows, which means it's only the free creatures. Good, good, good. Don't know why really wants to not move much further, but it is. Let's see, what is our Y value? Our Y value should only go up by 1 per route through here. Yeah, +1, +1. Well, plus, there it is, just +1. So that should be going fine. I need it to go significantly further than that, though. So let's say 0.5. This is going to go horribly wrong, I'm sure. The fact that that's a float, am I entirely wrong that that is percentile? That's the next question. Well, only one way to find out, I guess. So, yeah, we have some degree of mind control already. We also have it kind of in the faction mobs as well. If there's an event that fires when they try to retrieve what your current faction reputation is with their faction. So, if you implemented an effect that just hard-coded that to be 100, then a mob that by rights would assault you violently or flee from you in terror suddenly becomes your best friend. That's a form of mind control. Very simple, but it works. You can probably liken that more to charm effects, I guess. Okay, could you move there, please, so I can get you to actually come and guard there. Thank you. Okay, where does the second one go? Yeah, that's better. I don't think I can quite reach it back there. Thank you. Okay. Oh, hang on. Keep an eye. Yep, note that. Janet there is actually, at least I think that's Jarrett, Janet is actually looking up, which means these are still linked. That's not good. That doesn't make terribly much sense, but it might be because we didn't change their UUID. Charm is make you like me, mind control is your limbs are now my limbs, your will are not. Well, that's ish. Mind control is you're now my slave. Possession is now your limbs are now my limbs. Which is also a mind control effect. It's just that's the whole scale of replacing. So, if we want to do mind control, for mobs, it's relatively easy. For players, what we would need to do is essentially, like, shut off as many of their possible inputs as possible. And then create a fake, in essence, because we can't get rid of them, because since there's no distinction between body and brain in Minecraft, the body is there as long as the brain is. So, the player continues to exist even if we're stopping it from doing anything. There's no way to stop that. And yeah, so we would mind control the player, prevent them from doing anything. The easiest way to accomplish that is to just force them into a UI, as I do a few times with petrification and such, and then create a fake. A fake which would have to be a mob, but would nonetheless be functioning in as many respects as we could possibly find as a player, which we could then apply the AI to, and then suddenly we have something that we can command, and then whenever the effect wears off by any means, we just clone the data of the mob to the player and then teleport the player to wherever that mob was. That does mean that we need to render the player invisible and indestructible and whatnot in the interim, which is not very easy, but Snowbear there, you make a good point of putting them into a spectator, which is something we could theoretically do. If mind control, then magic jar with all its terrifying potential. Yes, if we can get mind control, we can get magic jar. We can also get dominate person. We can also get charm person. We can also get just taking control of some undead in your vicinity. But yeah, we would need to basically create a fake player, a doppelganger, if you will, and then have the AI system control that doppelganger, and then just sort of like replace the doppelganger with the actual player at the point of which the effect ends. Now, how do we solve the locked-in syndrome part? How do we solve the loss of agency part? The idea that the devs I was talking to and I came up with was a struggle mechanic. So I mentioned that players would most probably be stuck on a UI screen whilst they're in this state, so that their inputs amount to nothing in-game. I'll get back to code in a hot second, don't worry. A struggle mechanic in that effect would essentially be a puzzle. Some kind of on-screen puzzle that you need to solve. So you could liken it to rerouting your brain or some such. I believe... I'm trying to think, what was the... I think Simon Says from Among Us was basically the first thing I thought of. But I'm sure I'm sure, like, Among Us is full of lots of very simple, basic logic puzzles. Probably one of them would be very similar to what we came up with. We already have one in place for the locks, so you go through those and solve that. And you probably need to solve either a sufficient complexity of them or a sufficient number of them, but then the effect would end. And this has two possible benefits. The first benefit is that it gives the player who's currently being mind-controlled an actual piece of agency, an option that they can pursue in order to break out of the mind control and resume playing the game. The second thing, for the caster, say the enemy player that's trying to mind control you, it means that there is always a lower limit of how long it's going to last, meaning how long it takes you to solve the puzzle. So that means that mind control is always useful, but also that players aren't, like, completely hammed by it, essentially. Button mashing does get the visceral feel of really pushing for control back, yes, but I can speak from personal experience on this, it also is really, really bad for RSI. It's one of the reasons I don't play Survivor in Dead by Daylight, pretty much ever. It's because one of the major mechanics, the struggle mechanic, in fact, in Dead by Daylight, is button mashing. And that's really, really, really bad on your wrist. Try to avoid button mashing anywhere you can. It's not good. Okay, let's try and move our skeletons closer together as a start, and let's also try and actually change the MBT. Now I'm presuming that somewhere in here the UUID gets set. In which case, it's probably calling set unique ID. Which is probably itself part of the severe root entity class. Let's find out. There's the entity IDs, which are just integers, so those aren't what we're looking for. We're looking for the unique ID, which is right there. Let's see. Apparently that's part of Math Helper. Okay. I'm guessing that gets stored. Could we just remove that from... Yeah, if it has that. So if we just get the data from the entity and subtract that, then it should identify it as a separate entity. Oh ho 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 ho. Let's see, what was it called? Yes, just UUID. Grand. What if you get TP'd to a newly rendered plane where you have to parkour or so? Possible, but that requires loading an entire dimension. A dimension that might not ever even see play if no one ever uses mind control. Bearing in mind, for various oddities, we have a config that allows you to, like, blacklist spells. So, not great, not great. Having it being an on-screen, like, UI thing is much cheaper and much easier. Just set them functionally to spectator, just show them that one puzzle screen, and when they solve that puzzle screen, end the effect. Job done. But okay, we now remove the UID when we tell it when we give it the MBT, so it should now not actually try to do that again. Hopefully, it should recognize them as being very different entities. Okay, let's see if we manage to get our guys to be about the right size. Our guys and Janet. There's a reason to encounter anything significant in our session to manage to play a noisy minigame. Oh yes, good for building tension. There are actually, as strange and odd and counterintuitive as it might seem, we realized in the course of all of our ponderings on how to accomplish it, there are actually some in-game benefits to being mind-controlled, which I'll get to momentarily, because they're entertaining and amusing. New plane is a cool idea, especially for the yeet your soul out of your body flavor of mind control, but it would be very, very expensive solution in Minecraft. Yeah. For stuff like Magic Jar, you would probably just be reverted to a similar state to being mind controlled, but essentially a spectator. Okay. Oh hey, we're nearly together again. That's good to see. We're at weird odd angles, is the curious thing for me. But I know we're also not turning around at all. So that's... Oh, but we are still looking up and down. Oh! I think I might know why that is. It's because we're not changing the pitch. So it's probably reading the pitch. Ah. Okay. Is this gonna let me change the scale? Nope, not right now. Doesn't seem it. Yeah, there's all stuff. Right, yeah, when we read the MBT through, it's actually storing the rotation pitch because we're not actually saying that at all. So let's just set that again. I wonder if that yours is measured in radians. That wouldn't explain why they're at different angles. Just set that to 0 and see how they render. If they render a specific reliable direction when we set that to 0, we can just use the state manager to change it. Yeah, for Magic Jar, we would probably just create some kind of tile entity. If that tile entity was broken, then we would return you to your physical normal form, but in the meantime, we would put you into a state very similar to being in Spectator and very similar to being possessed, but from which you could then actually, like, select who you would go into based on distance to the jar. Headache is at the point where it's probably not going to go away to sleep it off, so we're going to bounce. That's fine, Abby. Have a good night. Thanks for coming. Trying to get the viewership numbers up on this stream, but trying to get viewers on Twitch is not simple. Okay, they're still not pointing in the same direction. That is interesting, but we do have them more or less about as far apart as we need them to be, so hey, there's that. And that, I don't know, does that feel like a sufficient size to everybody? Like, does that feel like a reasonable size to you? I might argue in favor of being slightly small, but again, the variety of mobs that you'll probably be controlling at a given time is relatively... I would be surprised if it frequently ever exceeds like 6. It's probably gonna be like 3 or 4. Particularly if you're a necromancer with a horde of the undead. Like, we're really pushing it just to have like 3 on screen right now. Yielding ever with so spectacular PowerPoint style frame rate. Oh, memories. Memories. Okay, so yeah, why... They're not looking up and down now, which is good. We want to see that. Why are they having different rotations? That is curious. Of course, we can just delete that value. When our entity serializes, we can just remove that value, because it's all in the same thing. So if we just remove motion, rotation, potentially even position, then it should be fine. We could also remove on ground, for instance. Let's see, do you mandatorily need those? Yes, you do. That's a bit of a bother. Yeah, it has to find them. Whew. Buffer. So, alternatively, replace them. If we can't get rid of them, we can just set them to be what we want to be. So let's see. There you are. Motion, rotation, position. We can change all of those before we actually send it into the thing. That is part of entity, it seems. And it's a protected thing. Bleh. Fine. I will steal it wholesale because you're being so incredibly annoying about this. It's not even a very complicated function, it's just NBT. UI elements need to be of a scale where they work well with potato mortars and actual player-side visual impairment. You're not wrong. Wait, hang on, that didn't cause any trouble when I asked for... Oh, because they're both doubles, that's why. Such excessive use of space. There. Okay. So now we overwrite those values. So that should mean that there is no reason whatsoever for our clone that we use on the screen to actually have anything. Snack? Oh, yeah, time for my break. See you in about 10, everybody. Everybody to the final hour of our evening tonight on stream, and we're finishing off with trying to make sure that our skeletons are the appropriate scale and ideally the same orientation. But before we left, I did say that there are some theoretical circumstances where a player would actually be benefited by being under mind control. Which is unusual for most kinds of negative effect. And to explain that, first I need to explain that currently, the companion system, where we're giving these commands and our skeletons are wandering around, is probably not the same system that would be used under mind control, though it would certainly be something quite similar. Because the companion system can't be applied to any mob at all, because it has to be specifically I configure a mob, there has to be individual handling for all that stuff, so it can't really be the same thing. But it can be something very similar. In which case, we need a system that can take a given directive, some kind of order or command, something you want to do, a quest, if you will, and break it down to a series of actions. Move to door, open door, go through door, flip, switch, that sort of thing. That can then be iteratively acted upon. So essentially a series of the companion commands we've been giving, but intelligently constructed. Now, in the occasion of a player being mind-controlled, that AI system would then be controlling them. So the player, hands-off keyboard and everything, would still be able to accomplish things. And that would mean that under certain circumstances, I think our skeletons are doing quite nicely. They are now properly rotated correctly, which is, say, directly facing camera, like The Office, and also nicely spaced. I like that. I like that good spacing. So then, think about it. If you're being controlled by an AI, or alternatively, if you have access to the option of having the AI play parts of the game for you, there are circumstances where you are benefited by this. The first and most obvious one I came up with is that one of the commands that we can give our skeletons here is we can have them follow us. So, if we mind controlled a player, we could tell them to follow us, and now that player can go and get a snack whilst we, ride our horses all the way back to town. Or that player can functionally serve as our valet whilst we're out getting, a whole ton of stuff at the market. That sort of thing. Or, and I imagine this one comes as one of the more important ones, there is a mining command in our companion system. So, provided you trust the party mage enough, I think that's an important caveat, you could have them mind control you, and then order you, in your mind-controlled state, to dig out a quarry. Whilst you're sleeping the same evening, or something. Or maybe, in a more complex situation, there's a boss fight that your friends and such are gonna do, and you'd really love to be there, but you've got a business meeting at about the same time, so you had to be on Zoom, you can't really be seen to be staring at your remote monitoring a boss fight. So have your character logged in, and have the party mage mind control you, and then you just have to trust the party mage knows what particular orders to give you. That's one of the more complex examples. Another one is there may very well be, across the span of all players in the game, there may very well be some things that you suck at. Parkour is a very popular and obvious one. Just gonna change that, there we go. So, if you really, really suck at parkour, but let's say we have a sufficiently competent AI system, then in theory, you can actually just be mind-controlled and have the system carry you to the end of the parkour course. At which point your friend can just release the mind control and off you go. A way to keep you alive through the Britannia Gaia Guardian fight. Or a way to keep you present, at the very least. Don't know about alive, but present. Trust that for telling a player to continually sow and harvest a large indoor farm. Yeah. Like, basically mind control, presuming that you have another person to actually, like, cast it upon you and operate it, is a way to automate a player. Mind control is typically described as being a negative experience, something you want to avoid, something that's, is, like, villainous in almost all contexts, but there are actual upsides to it in video games. At that point, under those circumstances, the person being mind controlled doesn't care about breaking the effect. They don't care about solving whatever mechanic or struggle mechanism is in place to try and break the effect. They just... They're doing something else. Maybe they're watching a movie or something. Like, it's a very strange kind of system. But, surprise, I guess. Okay, just gonna use that to just to reduce that. I do want to know why we have our... We have one of them rendered properly, and then other ones go, like, very odd. Don't know why that is. We have two different preview helds. Is there something being called here? No, it doesn't look like it. Nice. Now, question. When we call rotation, which one is your? Your is the first value. Okay, let's set that to 45 and see if that turns them to their left. If you can ensure the safety of your player and their stuff, you can ditch them while you handle other things. Yeah. Will the mage make sure we are fed and do not starve? Fortunately, in Minecraft, that's not so much of a problem. But, I guess theoretically, unless I added an eat command... But yeah, you'd still hoover up items, you'd still, like... be able to... You'd still, like, lose hunger, you'd still be able to take damage or heal it. Like, if you can do it whilst standing still AFK, that would still be in full effect, regardless of the AI system controlling it at the time. Which, by the way, hey, did you know... Like, here's a question for the chat. What do you think is the #1 benefit of all mind control effects? Every single one of them. Down to the down to the smallest from the largest. What is the one consistent major effect of them? What is the one benefit that is shared across every single mind control effect that you can imagine? What is it? Because there is one, and it's a very important one. Okay, did we? I don't recall changing the scale, and yet somehow they appear to have changed on the Y position. They look smaller to me. Oh, that might just because I've got a small screen on. No, they are about the same. And they are 45 degrees to their right, but that's fine, we can change it. Getting someone else to do the work for you, distant autonomy, finger wiggles. Nope, although entertaining suggestions. The #1 universal benefit of mind control is that the person you are mind controlling stops attacking you, and ideally doesn't do it again the whole time the mind control is active. That's it. It's functionally a paralysis effect, an instantly taking effect paralysis effect to that end. Everything after that can be whatever you like. It depends on the mind control effect, but the #1 thing that a mind control does first is it stops the thing from attacking you. And sometimes that's all that you need from it. But every single one of them does that, from charm person to dominate person. So that struggle mechanic that we mentioned you had to go through to break out of being mind controlled, you still get that benefit even if you're facing the absolute world's best player at breaking that at breaking those effects. So you wouldn't think that. You don't. It's not the thing you tend to think about when you think of mind control, but yeah. Okay, we set that to -45, and then we should actually see this thing properly. should be facing the correct direction. In theory, we could animate them to be walking or moving or looking around, but it's not really a huge necessity at that stage. Yeah, we will probably not have implemented mind control by the time that we start working on 1.16 forwards versions of various oddities. But that's definitely a thing that I want to get into, because I think I've made a decent case over the course of tonight for it. Like, what do you think? Okay, well, they're now facing the correct direction. You can see that. I feel like the minimum amount of animation I should give them is just like they're idle. With the arms going. Which I can do, actually. That is a thing that is very simple to add. Actually, can I just use the world time? There's a thought. Probably can. That'd be even easier. Let's try and make this a small value. I'm guessing that's also in the data here somewhere. Nope. Okay, that's fine. That means we can just set it here. Hell. So yeah, are there any? Can you imagine any other situations where you'd want to be mind controlled where that would be a positive? The capacity to put your character on autopilot is pretty incredible. Admittedly, it's not something you'd be able to do inside of single player. Which would be a hang-up for a lot of people, I can understand. But in multiplayer games, like on SMPs and such, I can see people getting a lot of use out of it. Like, at that stage, you don't even need an idle account or an alt. You just need someone who's like living in a different time zone to you and is willing to leave their computer running overnight. Which on SMPs tends to happen quite a lot, I've found. Okay, let's see if we can get their arms wiggling. Yeah, there we go. We do still have the funky rendering, but you can see their arms wiggling. Hooray! So, next we need to actually get these names marketed properly. Allow for effectively bottable automation, yeah. Depending on how you code the command system, you can basically make any player a computer craft turtle with far greater ease of use. And a much shorter duration. There are very few permanent mind control effects. And you probably wouldn't, just gentleman rules, you probably shouldn't use a permanent possession or mind control effect on a player. That's probably a bit mean. Okay, shift to the left a bit, and now I need to determine exactly where the actual X position is when they're actually rendered there. Humpty. Can you program it such that they hit a lever on a timer? That's the next part. It's easy enough to create a solver for an instantive thing, but to actually create a system by which you effectively program a player, that's harder. Like, that would be essentially just do this command until I tell you to do something else, that sort of thing. And that would require a system that I desperately really want to make for our companions, but I have been aggressively told not to. The simplest example of it being the spell creation system of PSI, by Vazki a ways back, which was a really powerful system and let you do almost anything if you could put it together, but the fact that you had to program it, even with the scripting language being provided, basically turned a lot of people off that mod. Including me, for a fair chunk. So... yeah, like that. I do need to make something like that for triggers. There's a bunch of spells that have the caster customizable triggers, like things that cause it to do something. And they're exceedingly vague inside of the spell descriptions in 3.5. So I do need to make some kind of scripting system for that, but it would probably be... Has anyone ever heard of code blocks? It would be something very similar to code blocks. Let me see if I can pull up a visual example of code blocks. I think someone might have used it as a brand name at some stage. There's what I'm looking for. Okay. Right. So, this is essentially a visual programming language. You have a super object, and then you plug in different pieces to the bottom of it that modify it. That's probably what I'd need to make triggers. But... yeah, that's a lot. At that point, you'll have made your companion system literally contain the most advanced, powerful, time-consuming, and user-unfriendly part of computer craft. The computer part of it. I mean, I found computer craft to be quite user-friendly, but admittedly I'm a programmer, so... Okay, does anyone remember what the... oh, hang on, I can check it. Just current action does not equal null. Right. In which case, that's the default. So let's set that to 40. And where do we want to... we need to figure out where that Y position correlates to in the vertical aspect. Seriously, the least user-friendly part of computer craft was computer. Okay. Well, I suppose some of us play different games then. Okay, let's bring that up there. And we want to say... well, I want to calculate the Y position as... are we presuming that can't be... like, by the time we get to 3, that's gotta be... it's only like halfway down the screen by that point, so that can't be equal to the actual pixel position. Unless it's because we then scale it by the render scale. Well, let's find out. Text Y should then be equal to... let's see, we want Y... basically Y pos. Y position times resolution scaled height times render scale. In theory, that should be the Y position of any part of this that we care to use. Here's hoping. The fact that it ran on a very specific... Yeah, in this case, it would be much more simplistic. It would be like constructing Legos, which I would hope would be much more user-friendly than actual coding. It's like people try to draw a lot of distinctions between the words coding and scripting and programming. I don't tend to know which one I fall into most, but yeah. Sure man's infinity minutes, it does indeed. But yeah, like at some point I would classify that as a more scripting language than a coding or programming kind of language. Just taking like you pick an object, let's say for making a trigger you want to detect if an entity turns up within visible, becomes visible to the spell, then you would put in a like entity block. And if you wanted, and then it would have like potential attachments, like like type, that sort of thing, or equipment, that sort of thing. So that you grab the type one, you chunk it onto that, and the next thing it gives you a drop-down bar of like what you want, that sort of thing. Player, zombie, that sort of thing. And that would then it would have to detect a zombie within range of the spell to trigger. That's the sort of thing that I would be most likely to code for triggering. Don't know if we'll do that for this next release, but it'd be very handy. Okay. Well, they're definitely far more to the side. But it would seem that the Y position is static, which is not correct. Although, intriguingly, we also appear to have all of our skeletons in one Y position. How'd that sound? Have we been changing render scale? Nope, we haven't been changing that. Y position there is a consequence of the Y value that we're not any more changing. That's why. That's why everything was at the same point. Gotcha. So we changed that to Y position so that I wasn't interfering with anything, and then we didn't change the thing I was actually trying to change with. Whoops. Flying 7-hour stream when? Well, I'm currently at, what, 19 subscribers? Let's say 1,000. 1K subscribers, I'll do a 7-hour stream. I'll program a Minecraft mod from start to finish in those 7 hours. How's that? Or at the very least, let's see like 30 average viewers on these coding streams, because that I actually need to get to. Okay, now they're separated. And they do have their names largely next to one another. I think we want to bring them slightly further in from the left there. And also bring their names closer to them as well. If you have a large enough entity, something bigger than a skeleton, it is going to overlap. There's not much I can do about that. Not much, anyways. But okay. That's good progress. And I do think I can add a quick little bit of scaling. So if we go to render item, there is where are you? Render model. There's the stack. We're gonna check the count. There you are. So stack count does not equal 1. Nope. It's not very useful. I know there's a point where you actually decide how many of these things to render at once. I just cannot remember for the life of me where it is. And of course this is used everywhere. Let's see, client, renderer, render item overlay, nope. Render entity item, is that the one I'm thinking of? Yep, there you are. Okay, model count. Let's grab something similar to that. This is horrifying. This, oh lord, this is so bad. Looking at this. Blimey. You don't even need to do that, just return. You can just return. You don't need to go through all of these if-ands. Oy. We both know that you would start a small mod at hour 1, and by hour 6 you'll be remaking biomes of plane to take real-world laws of geography and biodiversity and world. Look. Shut up. I could probably even just combine this into a switch case, but oy. Okay, grab that, down to there, place it with tally. There. Okay. So, for, let's see, mob name. For get model count, tally. And then it would be that plus I times 0.02f, I guess. That seems like a decent value. And let's set that at 0.1. Okay. So it only goes up to 5, but by the point you hit 5, you've got the better part of like 50. But that should mean that our stack of 2 skeletons is now significantly more visually distinct from our stack of 1. Okay, Shelly equal 1. I'm actually gonna store these in things up here, because why not? Or should I just call that named, I guess? Yeah. Versus generic. Let's see, hollow.has custom name. Wolfram, if you could stop roasting me in the chat, I'd be much obliged. Okay, and that over here. Entry dot named, otherwise. There. Probably also want one for solo just in case there's... I should shut up right now. Janet X1 is fine, I think. I don't think there's a huge problem with Janet X1. But yeah, if we get to 1,000 subs, I will absolutely do like a more than double length live stream of coding. Like, absolutely. But for now, my main goal is 30 average viewers. Because it tends, especially on Twitch, it tends to be that you either stream something really popular that people are already watching elsewhere anyways, or you stream something that is extremely niche and there's not really anybody watching to begin with. Either way, it's hard to get viewers. So, yeah, let's aim for 30 viewers average. And for that, I need the help of all of you to, like, spread the word about this stream and make sure that people know that it's, at the very least, nice to listen to in the background. Okay, we have a slight problem, but we do have a pair of skeletons over there, so that's progress. So, they're at a 45-degree angle, so they are clipping over each other. But if we change how far apart they are, we can make them a bit more distinct. I don't think that's gonna work over here while I'm working on this, but you never know. And I need to change the arguments that are going into the entry. Do we have any friends we're gonna raid? I don't think any of mine are streaming at this hour. Which, come to think of it, might be partially my problem. But also, I'm English and it's nearing midnight here, so... that's not dreadfully surprising. I don't think I'll update it live. No, it hasn't, but we can reboot it real quick. Spread the good word of the great lying, who is perfect for falling to sleep. But okay, I think I am basically done with this. I don't think there's really anything more I can do to make it more usable or user-friendly, to be exact. I think it's good. Obviously needs a little bit of tidying up, but most things after these streams do. We'll see exactly what becomes of it next stream. Next stream, though, we will be starting to work on a few of the more outstanding things inside of this version, which includes an entity and mini-boss known as the Broodbringer, whom, if you haven't been around for long enough, basically is a xenomorph queen. Okay, there we go. Janet X1 remains. I think that's good. I think that's fine. Do we think that that is a sufficiently useful array of information? I think so. Obviously need to fix the lighting on it. Obviously need to do other stuff to it, but I think that is a meaningfully useful array of information. My primary audience is on YouTube. What about that exactly? YouTube and Twitch do have overlap. Said overlap does tend to be for either real big name content makers and or those aforementioned already about subjects. Like you can see our channel list, there are people with thousands of YouTube subscribers to the channel, so we get about 100 subscribers at best. Fair. Okay. Anyways. So if I do that, Yep, goes in, but that's fine. Like, that's because I didn't change the values. Probably peek those in a bit. And definitely subtract from the text Y a bit, so that it's actually, like, more in line with its actual target. Do we even necessarily need to be able to see the X2? Or do we even necessarily need to be able to see the numbers? I guess maybe when model count doesn't equal how many are actually in the group, but I think it's fine. It reads clearly, which is important. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't think it's too obtrusive, at the very least. Let me rescale that and see how it changes. Yeah. I think you would have to try pretty dang hard to make that obtrusive. So it's probably fine. And I will probably change the text X, so that's actually more proportional to the resolution, which will keep it a bit tighter in check. Okay, right. Oh. So, next stream will be on a Thursday at 9, and we'll have some Among Us, probably with the World of Madness friends, but also with the community. And then on Saturday, as per usual, we spin the wheel at the carousel and play some games with the patrons. And we will be back for more programming fun on Tuesday at 9, where we will start to work on a Xenomorph Queen. And if you haven't been watching these for a while, you'll get to catch up with the changelings, who have some of the heaviest code I've ever written. So do be up for that. That'll be like some fun, I'm sure. And you'll get to see the witch a lot, because naturally the changelings are like beholden to the witch. Huh. But other than that, I do make videos at youtube.com/remembercomic, and everything I do, especially in this year of unprecedented terror and horribleness, is paid for by you at patreon.com/lying. Without you, I'm not able to do anything, actually, pretty much. So thank you very much for keeping the lights on, and my actual computer on, for that matter. Yeah. Huh. Among Us Snow Bear is Thursdays at 9 PM GMT. Or Fridays for Esper, yes. Anyways, hope you all enjoyed. I'll catch you all as ever next time. You're a real riggedy,